What's up, guys? Big Papa Drock back with another King Arthur Legends Rise video. Guys, it is so good to see you. I hope that you are having a fantastic day. I am excited to get to talk a little more King Arthur Legends Rise. A big thank you to everybody that has used my download link, which, by the way, is down in the description below. So if you haven't checked out King Arthur Legends Rise, make sure to do it. They are sponsoring this video, and I am extremely thankful to them for doing so. And yeah, I am loving this game, genuinely having a blast. And so today we're going to talk about something a little more, I guess, a little more intense than what we've covered in some of our previous videos. And that is how King Arthur handles gear. Because I think it's something that is much more in depth in some ways than other games like Raid are. And definitely something that I have been slowly wrapping my head around so that I could make this video to try to better understand exactly how all these systems work and what some of these different gear types are. So again, if you haven't downloaded the game, make sure to use my link. It's down below in the description. It's going to be a pinned comment as well. I think we have a couple spots left in the clan, but it's getting pretty full. So I don't know. We'll see. I don't know. I can't guarantee anything, but if people... if there are spots and you want in, make sure to join the Discord as well and ask me, and I'll try to get you in there if there are spots left. So gear is a really interesting thing in King Arthur. Let's start with, how do you get it, right? Like, where do you get gear for the most part in King Arthur? Well, you have a couple different places to do so. You've got stuff that you can get in the campaign. So if you go to the story, you might get certain chests that let you get potentially gear, or you might get some gear from clearing a level, and it will tell you here what your chances are and what you're going to get. But for the most part, the best place to get gear is in the equipment dungeon. So if you go to the restricted area down here, you've got the equipment dungeons right here, and you've got 3 different dungeons in this area that give you specific types of gear, and it will tell you right here exactly what they are. So we've got attack, critical, and speed on your Skelhag. We've got defense, life, and drain on Apolea. I can't even pronounce this name. Apolea. I know how to read. And then on Arcelus, you've got corrosion, immortal, and strife, and these are your keepsake items that are essentially, your belt and your banner and your orb. So different from your main body. So this is the majority. This is where you're gonna get most of your gear. We're gonna do most of your farming. You come in here, you clear this stuff, you get your gear. Awesome, super cool. The other thing too is that you get crafting materials that are specific to each type of dungeon as well. So you can see over here what you get for a first clear, and then your expected reward, which you have a chance of different things whenever you clear a stage. You'll notice there are crafting materials in here as well, which is also one of the other main ways that you get gear in this game. And some gear can only be crafted, or predominantly comes from being crafted, which is important to keep in mind. So each dungeon has its own crafting materials. Some of them overlap, but for the most part, they have their own individual things. So you'd need to farm each individual dungeon to get those specific crafting materials. So let's talk about how gear works on your champions and how you can see what your champions look like with gear on them. Now, when you go to your hero management screen, so I click down here to heroes, go to hero management, you've got a tab for equipment, and that's where you can see all of your different gear and what's on your champion, and then also what's been enhanced. So essentially leveled up. There are up to 12 levels for gear, but you have to have at least 4-star gear to get to the 12th level. If it's 1 through 3 stars, it only goes up to level 9. So you can see here, you can't enhance this further. It's stuck at level 9 because it's a 3-star piece of gear. Now, I'm still very much at the beginning of my King Arthur journey. I've been playing for just over 2 weeks. So my gear is really not anything special at the moment. There's a lot of stuff I'm going to have to farm over time, and it's going to improve. But that's part of the game, right? It takes time to get really good gear. So when you go into your equipment section, you'll have a section here that gives you detailed equipment settings. And this also allows you potentially to try things on temporarily to see how it changes your stats. You get a change right here. But the interesting thing about this is this isn't the most detailed area for your champion and what their stats are. If you go over to info and you click over here on stats with the search, the little magnifying glass, you actually get a better breakdown if you click again And here you get pretty much everything and where all of your stats are coming from. So what you're getting from your heroes and what level they are, from relics and equipments, your boosted effects, like everything is in this menu. So if you ever have a question about what specifically your champion looks like, this is the place to come. Let's take a quick moment to talk about stats and what's really important in this game too. Now, obviously, it depends on the character, right? If you're looking to build a damage dealer, well, you're probably going to want a lot of crit rate, a lot of crit damage, most likely high attack, depending on what they do. And then also the thing that's universal for pretty much everybody is attack speed and vigor charge. Vigor. To remind you, vigor is what allows you to do your abilities. So anything beyond your A1 ability costs vigor typically. And so you're going to need vigor in order to do those things. And thankfully, there is actually a vigor set, which we will get into in a minute. But for the most part, your important stats here: attack speed, effect accuracy, hit accuracy. These are some of the big ones that are going to come into play, especially for damage dealers, would be things like hit accuracy, which is the ability to actually land a hit. My understanding is as you go further in the game, bosses get more evasion built into their actual stats, which is the ability to make you miss. And so if you don't have enough hit accuracy, you literally will not be able to do damage, for example, with a damage dealer. So hit accuracy, very important. Pierce is like ignore defense, I believe. Endurance is the ability to resist that, is my understanding, or to reduce that. So there's a lot of different stuff in here, right? Drain rate, I think, revolves around, I think, lifesteal. Here we go. Likelihood of recovering own HP equal to a portion of damage dealt. So this is great. You can actually click these things if you ever have a question. Isn't that awesome? I love that. Pierce percentage. Upon attacking, deals damage as the target's defense stat decreased by an amount equal to the attacker's pierce stat. Yep. So ignore defense. It tells you exactly right there. If you ever have a question, go ahead and click stuff. And that's one of the things I think that King Arthur does really, 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 really well, is that in a lot of areas of this game, and it's not just about stats, but even with equipment, right? If you go to equipment and you click on something and you're like, oh, a healing helm, where do I get this from? Well, you can actually left click on these menus and just source it. And it will tell you, like, healing helm, it comes specifically from equipment crafting. That's how you have to grab it. Or something like an attack helm, it comes from the main story, so campaign essentially, equipment dungeons and equipment crafting. This is such a nice quality of life thing where you can click an item and know exactly how to get it or how not to get it, depending on if you have stamina or if you have crafting materials left. So that's just something to keep in mind. So we'll actually, let's take a quick look at that right now. So in terms of the best sets in the game, my understanding is this. Vigor is pretty much your top tier set when it comes to any kind of healer or any kind of debuffer. So someone like a Morgan who's applying debuffs or status effects, Vigor is the way to go because you have an opportunity to do more of those abilities when you are in a Vigor set, because it recharges your Vigor with an extra bonus one every time. You'll notice when it comes to getting Vigor, it's only from equipment crafting. And I think possibly from other like little special event type stuff, or I can't remember if I got some from completing some areas of the campaign the first time. I might be misimagining that or not remembering correctly, but for the most part, you're going to be crafting this stuff for sure. That is the vast majority of where you're going to get your Vigor gear. And it is tricky to get these materials. Like, you are not going to be able to just go into a dungeon and just walk away with massive amounts of materials right off the bat. It is going to take time. The other thing to keep in mind with these sets too, and with all this gear, is each piece of gear has its own specific type of sets that it is allowed to have. Now, if you ever have a question about what that is, what piece allows you to have what stat, the good thing is there's a really easy place to check. And it's right down here where it says stat info. So if you click this, I actually already brought this up earlier. You can go right over here and it's going to tell you every single stat potential on a piece of gear. So for your helm, they're always a flat stat attack as the main stat. For the chest piece, the cuirass, it's always defense. For boots, it's always HP, right? For those main stats. And then you can see for earrings, necklaces and rings, what's really interesting about how King Arthur does this is that you have a different pool of stats when items are 1 to 3 stars versus when they are 4 to 6 stars for those specific pieces. So why does this matter? Well, in the early game, it's a lot easier to craft to craft something to have one of the stats you might be looking for. Whereas as you get further and you're getting 4 to 6 star gear, there is a lot wider pool here, so it's harder to nail down exactly what you want. Let's talk briefly too about what stats you're kind of looking for on these different pieces, depending on what you're looking to build, like what your character is. So earrings, necklaces, and rings, again, have a wide pool of stats. Let's start with rings. You'll notice you've got stuff like flat attack, defense, and HP, and then also percentage attack, defense, and HP. So if you're going to do something with a percentage, you definitely would prefer that over a flat stat. But keep in mind, your rings are the only places on your main set of gear that you're getting attack speed beyond your keepsakes, which I believe one of them has a chance for attack speed as well, which I think is I want to say the orb. Yes, it is the orb. So the orb, you could also have attack speed on it too. This is important because you need your characters to be able to take more turns. And also what I've noticed as you go deeper into the game, bosses, of course, get faster and faster and faster. If you're not fast enough to land your abilities before they do, or to take enough turns to negate what they're doing, you're going to really struggle. So attack speed for a ring, this is the way to go for basically almost everybody in the game, I would imagine, at least from my perspective. For necklaces, you've got effect accuracy here, which would be fantastic if you're trying to do a debuffer. So if you're trying to make sure that somebody is placing those status effects, you're probably going to want to go effect accuracy. You could also go effect resistance if you're trying to build someone that's super resistance heavy and ignore those, or prevent those debuffs from being placed as well. So kind of your standard stuff, right? In terms of you've got accuracy, you've got resistance. One of the big differences with King Arthur and other games, though, or at least with Raid, which is where the majority of us are coming from, is you've got hit accuracy and you've got effect accuracy, right? You've got hit accuracy that relates to literally physically damaging somebody, and then you've got effect accuracy that relates to placing a debuff. So two different accuracy categories in this game versus in Raid, which is something to be aware of. Now, if you were building a damage dealer, you might be going with attack percentage on the necklace instead of something like effect accuracy, right? Or maybe you're going with just pure HP if you have a healer HP percentage, if you don't need to worry about somebody placing debuffs. And then we've got earrings, which again, we've got a lot of different stats here. We've got critical strike rate and critical strike damage, which could be something you do with a damage dealer, for example, or again, possibly hit accuracy if you need someone to make sure they are landing those blows as a damage dealer. So there's a lot of depth in this game, and it can be overwhelming. I'll be completely honest, right? When I first fired up, I was like, oh man, there are so many different stats that can land on stuff. And we're not even looking at the substats, right? These are just main stats. If you scroll down, you'll actually start to get to what the substat potentiality is. So look here, you've got a whole mess of different substats that can land on each piece. So this chart is your best friend when you're starting out. And again, just to remind you, it is in the equipment crafting section of the Forge. You can get to it from your hero management screen, like we just did by going to equipment and then going to source info and then going to equipment crafting. So there's multiple ways to get here, or you can also just get there by directly clicking Forge and going right to equipment crafting and getting there that way, and then just clicking down on stat info. But it is such a godsend because there is so much depth. What it reminds me of, I think a little bit, is if you've ever played in the Diablo series or even Path of Exile, stuff like that, it can be very easy to get overwhelmed by this stuff. But the biggest thing is to look at the chart, get an idea of what is out there, and then start to think about what your characters do, and then how you are going to enhance that ability. Damage dealers need critical strike and critical strike damage. Healers need HP percentage. They need speed. They need vigor. Debuffers need speed and vigor. you know, if as long as you're taking that kind of tact, you can build any hero in the game. Now, the interesting thing too, when you look at all this stuff, and so if you look at like crafting these different sets, you'll notice for some of these items, if you come down to like the keepsakes, they have their own stuff that's going on here, their own different sets. And some of these are things that you can't, the materials you can actually obtain except from, so here we go, equipment dungeon for this. But if you go to like Unity and Focus, there is no source list for this. Like, wait, what? How do I get this? And so the answer for this is this comes from in-game events. This comes from essentially things you might actually purchase in the game. So there is nothing currently specified for how you can obtain Focus and Unity set materials to craft them. So just keep that in mind. And again, different materials are needed, or different rarities depending on the rank of item you're trying to craft. So always keep that in mind when you're in here messing around. And also for keepsake items as well, you'll notice you've got different, essentially the factions that these heroes are in. So these keepsake items can only be worn by those specific heroes in that specific favor, I guess, or that specific area. So for example, Bedivere here is a crow, which means if I go into equipment and I want to put something on him, it has to be a crow keepsake. It can't be a hound or a or a bull or something else. It has to be crow. So a lot of stuff, right? A lot of stuff, very, 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 very large amount of stuff to try to take in. If you'll also notice here, you've got the option to build 2 different sets of gear on a hero, which is awesome. Like, that's fantastic. However, something to keep in mind with this is that you cannot reuse items from your first set. So you have to have a entirely different set to put on the second thing. You can't have any carryover. So this is something that really, for someone like me who's just starting out, and possibly for you if you're just starting out, since the game is pretty new, you're not going to be worrying about this stuff, right? Like, the biggest thing for us right now, for beginners, is just getting good gear and being able to enhance it and level it up, and hopefully getting the right specific stats. Like, you'll notice if you look at some of my champions, I'm just using whatever I've got, right? Like, I might be using, in this case, multiple critical sets because I want to increase my critical strikes. That's the other thing, is these sets will give you a bonus if you have 2 or 4 of them. And again, it will tell you right here, right? This is a speed set. You need 4, and it will give you an attack speed increase. At the beginning of your journey, getting the 100% right stat as a main stat is a lot less important than just having, decent gear to start with. Like, you're not going to always have an attack speed ring. And for example, if you look at the entirety of my gear, I think I've only got like a handful of these, and most of these are like super low level, 2-star, 3-star type stuff. I haven't had a chance to play the game enough to get better gear, and that's okay. But again, thinking about damage dealers, we're thinking about crit rate, we're thinking about crit damage, we're thinking about usually attack and hit accuracy. Those are our big things that we're looking at to start off with. If we're looking at debuffers, my Morgan's actually built more as a damage dealer right now, but ideally we're looking for a lot more effect accuracy than this, 40, 50, 60+% as you go along, and then attack speed is really big. And then hopefully in a vigor set. But the problem for me is I just don't have a lot of good vigor gear. And for now, most of my vigor gear is on my healers, because that's really what you're looking to do there. If you're looking to heal effectively, you want to put your vigor gear on your healers, so that they have more opportunities to use those abilities to recharge that vigor meter. So definitely one of the absolute best sets in the game. It's just crazy to me, the amount of depth here, right? And there's so much for me still to learn as we go through this, but I will say that I am genuinely enjoying how many different things there are to master in this game versus others that I have played. And certainly equipment is part of that, where it is definitely something where it's like, wow, there's so much depth here that I just truly did not even grasp. And you'll notice I don't even have a single character that's 6-star awakened yet, right? My closest is Bedivere, who's only 5-star awakened, because again, it takes time to get these materials from these favored dungeons. But great thing about King Arthur is it tells you exactly where to go. Forbidden Dungeon. This is also a really, really, really important area when it comes to getting certain gear sets as well. So if we look in here, we go back to equipment. There are some, I believe, that only come from the Forbidden Dungeon area. I can't remember which ones they are, but I know that there are a couple that you need to go into that to snag. I'll have to try to find them, but God only knows which one it is. So this is the excitement of being new to the game, right? I'm still figuring all this fun stuff out as well. But if you ever have a question, you can just pop into the Forbidden Dungeon itself and then just look at some of the things that you might actually get here. So it'll helpfully tell you what you're winning on each individual floor. You'll notice pedestals here a lot, which are important for awakening relics. So it does do a good job of telling you what things are used for as long as you click on things. So if you ever have a question, if you're ever confused, just click on stuff, right? Like just start clicking on stuff and allow yourself to read what they are telling you, because they do a good job of at least laying out pretty much everything you need to know as long as you click on things. But that's the gist of it, guys. This is kind of like a beginner's guide to understanding how this works, right? Use the forge and use that stat info in the equipment section to understand exactly what each thing can be. But always keep in mind that certain pieces of gear only have certain stats, right? And you can't make them different no matter how hard you try. The one area you can change stuff, of course, is if you actually change substats. So you can't change main stats, but if you go into equipment, you'll get this handy dandy powder or stat change stone. This is pretty hard to come by. I think you get like 1 per day from doing your dailies, your quests. So you got to be judicious about how you use this, but it will allow you to change one of the substats at random. So it's kind of a tricky thing, because if you get a good piece of gear, like, so for example, for me, this is a really strong piece of gear because it has crit rate, crit damage, it has attack speed. You can see that it's been enhanced where it's landed 2 enhancements into attack speed and 1 to critical strike damage. Like, this is a pretty good piece. I don't even want to try to risk using a change stat on this because I don't want to lose one of these really good rolls, even if I'm trying to replace HP percentage, for example, with attack, so that Bedivere does more damage. So you just got to be smart about it, because the last thing you want to do is ruin a good piece, run out of change stat materials, and not be able to make your hero as strong as they need to be, because your gear has dropped off. So that's the gist of it, guys. A lot to understand, a lot of complexity, a lot of depth. We're going to learn, I think, together as we go along, but certainly I have a much better understanding of how stuff works after the first couple weeks of playing this than I did when it first fired it up. So if you're one of those people where you just started and you feel overwhelmed, don't worry. It takes a little bit of time, but you'll start to grasp things better, especially as you do battles and you see, stuff like, oh, this ability was resisted or you missed. And then you have an idea of where that relates to stat-wise that you might need to improve. And always reach out, ask questions. I'm putting a little King Arthur area in my Discord to try to help people out with the things that I've learned. And there are other players in the game that know way more than me that have been playing for, I think, a couple months in early access or even longer, that are going to have even more knowledge for us to learn from. So I'm always a big believer in you can never find enough sources to give you an idea of how to improve. So that's the gist of it, guys. I hope this helped understand a little bit more about how gear works. Again, I know there's a ton to cover and I could probably talk for like 5 hours about different areas of how this works, but just click on things and it's going to give you a much better idea. All right. Thank you so much for watching. Again, use my link down below if you haven't had a chance to try the game yet. It is genuinely a ton of fun. And in my opinion, just a lot less stress than some of the other stuff that I play, which is really nice. This has been a nice breath of fresh air for a game of this genre for sure. So make sure to click the link down below. Thank you so much for watching. I will catch y'all soon. Big Papa Drock out.